She collapsed at his feet during the throne room assembly, blood streaming from a gash on her temple, her dress torn and muddy, her eyes wild with terror as she gasped out words that made 300 immortals freeze. "Please, hell find me. He always finds me. Please, don't let him take me back." Wait, before the next revelation happens. If this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To make sure you don't miss any unexpected alliances or awakened powers, subscribe and join our circle. The game is about to change. Now, back to the scene. King Alexander rose from his throne with supernatural speed, his ancient presence filling the room like a storm about to break. Every vampire in the assembly held their breath as he descended the dais steps, his crimson eyes fixed on the trembling human woman who'd somehow breached palace security to throw herself at his mercy. "Who," he said softly, dangerously, "will find you?" The woman flinched at his voice, but forced herself to look up. Her face was a map of old bruises beneath fresh blood, her left eye swollen nearly shut, her lip split. But her remaining good eye held desperate determination. Marcus Thorne, Lord Marcus Thorne. The name came out as a broken whisper. "He owns me. Hell kill me for running. Please, Your Majesty, I know I have no right to ask, but please." She didn't finish. Her body gave out, consciousness fleeing as blood loss and exhaustion finally claimed her. Alexander caught her before she hit the marble floor. His hands were surprisingly gentle as he gathered the unconscious woman against his chest, and when he turned to face his court, something ancient and terrible burned in his crimson eyes. "Someone fetch the royal physician, now!" His voice cracked like a whip. Then, to his captain of the guard, "Mikhail, find out everything about Marcus Thorne, where he lives, what he owns, who protects him. I want a full report within the hour." "Your Majesty," Lord Severin, head of the traditionalist faction, stepped forward with barely concealed contempt. "Surely you're not considering, this is clearly a slave dispute, human matters, beneath your attention. Simply return the girl to her master and—" "Her master?" Alexander's voice dropped to something so cold that frost literally began forming on the windows. "Did you just suggest that humans can own other humans in my kingdom?" The temperature plummeted 20 degrees. Several younger vampires backed away from the throne. Severin went pale as a vampire could go anyway. "The law clearly states..." "The law states that slavery was abolished in this kingdom 200 years ago, the day I took the throne, the day I decided that no sentient being would be property in my lands." Alexander's eyes blazed. "So, I'll ask you again, Lord Severin, more clearly this time. Did you just suggest that someone in my kingdom is owning humans as slaves?" That is, Lord Thorne operates within the boundaries of..." "Within the boundaries of what? The law or your willful blindness?" Alexander shifted the unconscious woman in his arms, his jaw tight. "This assembly is dismissed. All of you except Mikhail and my inner council. The rest of you, get out of my sight before I start asking more uncomfortable questions of who else has been turning blind eyes to slavery in my kingdom." The throne room emptied rapidly. Within moments, only Alexander, the unconscious woman, his captain of the guard, and 5 members of his inner council remained. "Mikhail," Alexander said quietly, "the information, now. I don't care who you have to threaten or what favors you have to call in. I want to know everything about Marcus Thorne and his operations." The captain nodded and vanished with supernatural speed. Lady Natasha, Alexander's Minister of Justice and oldest friend, approached the throne with careful steps. You're planning something dramatic. I'm planning to enforce my own laws. Alexander looked down at the woman in his arms. So small, so broken, so brave to have run and kept running until she found him. Someone has been openly flouting my authority, Natasha. Openly operating a slave trade under my nose. That cannot stand. If you move against Thorne directly, the traditionalists will see it as overreach. Let them. His voice was flat. I've spent 2 centuries trying to change this kingdom gradually, diplomatically, always worried about the traditionalists' delicate feelings. And in the meantime, how many humans have suffered? How many have been enslaved while I played politics? Alexander. She asked for my protection, Natasha, threw herself at my feet and begged me not to let him take her back. His hand brushed the woman's matted hair back from her bloodied face with surprising tenderness. I will not fail her. I will not send her back to whatever hell she escaped from, even if it means war with every traditionalist in the kingdom. Natasha studied him for a long moment. Then she smiled, sharp and approving. Good. It's about time you remembered you're a king, not a diplomat. What do you need from me? Prepare legal briefs. I want every law on the books regarding slavery, human rights, and my authority as sovereign. If Thorne or anyone else challenges me on this, I want to bury them in legal precedent. Done. Natasha turned to go, then paused. For what it's worth, she was right to come to you. If anyone can protect her, it's you. Then I'd better live up to that expectation. The royal physician arrived moments later, an ancient vampire named Soren, who'd been a doctor when human and had continued practicing for 5 centuries after his turning. He examined the unconscious woman with gentle efficiency, while Alexander hovered nearby, unable to walk away. Broken ribs, fractured wrist, extensive bruising, both old and new. Soren's voice was professionally neutral, but his jaw was tight. Signs of long-term malnutrition and abuse. Multiple scars consistent with whipping, and... He paused, his expression darkening. Vampire bite marks, recent ones. Whoever owned her was feeding from her regularly. Alexander's hands clenched into fists. Can you heal her? I can stabilize her, set the bones, close the wounds, but the malnutrition and blood loss will take time to recover from. She needs rest, proper food, safety. Soren met the king's eyes. Can you provide those things? If she's running from someone powerful, I can provide them. Alexander's voice was iron. No one will touch her while she's under my protection. No one. Then she'll recover, physically at least. Soren began working, his hands glowing with healing magic. The psychological damage will take longer. She's been traumatized extensively. It will take time for her to feel safe again. She'll have that time. Alexander watched as the worst of the woman's injuries began to knit under Soren's magic. Whatever time she needs. Mikhail returned as Soren was finishing. The captain's expression was grim. Lord Marcus Thorne, minor nobility from the southern holdings. Officially, he runs several vineyards and a textile mill. Unofficially, Mikhail pulled out a leather folder filled with documents. He operates a servant procurement business, buys humans from desperate families, promises them work and wages, then uses magical contracts to bind them into servitude. The contracts are technically legal, barely, but functionally they're slavery. The humans can't leave, can't refuse orders, can't seek outside help without triggering punishment clauses. Alexander took the folder, flipping through pages with increasing fury. How many? At least 50 humans currently in his employment, probably more that we haven't found yet. Mikhail's voice was hard. And he's not the only one, Your Majesty. There are at least a dozen nobles operating similar schemes throughout the kingdom. They call them long-term indenture contracts to skirt around the slavery laws. Clever. Alexander's voice could have frozen the sun. And evil. Who else knows about this? The traditionalist faction definitely knows. Lord Severin has been blocking investigations for years, claiming they're internal matters for the noble houses to handle. Mikhail's jaw tightened. Your Majesty, if you move against Thorn, you'll be moving against a system that's been operating for decades. The pushback will be significant. Let it be significant. Alexander closed the folder. Summon Marcus Thorn to court, tomorrow. Tell him it's a routine audit of his business practices. I want him here before he realizes what's happening. And when he arrives, then we'll see what he has to say for himself. Alexander looked down at the woman, still unconscious but breathing steadier now. Her wounds healed enough that she was no longer in immediate danger. What's her name? According to Thorn's records, which I may have illegally obtained, she's listed as Asset 23, Sophia Reed, 24 years old, purchased from her family 6 years ago when they couldn't pay their taxes. Mikhail's expression was disgusted. He's been using her as a personal servant and a blood source. Her family sold her? Her family believed they were sending her to work in Thorn's household with the promise that she'd earn enough to pay off their debt and return home. Instead, Thorn trapped her in magical bondage and never let her send word back. Mikhail's hands clenched. The family thinks she's thriving. They don't know she's been enslaved. Alexander felt something crack inside his chest. 6 years. This woman, Sophia, had been trapped for 6 years, abused and used and slowly losing hope, until she'd found the courage to run. Find her family, he said quietly. Make sure they're taken care of, and tell them the truth, gently, that their daughter has been mistreated, but she's safe now, under my personal protection. Your Majesty, Mikhail hesitated. If you claim her as being under your personal protection, the court will assume there will be rumors about your relationship with her, about why you're taking such interest in one human. Let them rumor. Alexander's voice was firm. I don't care what they think. I care that she asked for my protection and I'm going to give it to her. Properly, completely, so thoroughly that Marcus Thorn will never dare to even think her name again. Mikhail nodded slowly. As you command. After everyone left, Alexander carried Sophia to his private chambers. Not the grand staterooms where he entertained, but his actual living space in the highest tower. He laid her carefully on the guest bed, made sure she was warm and comfortable, then sat in a chair by the window to keep watch. He didn't sleep, hadn't needed sleep in 3 centuries, so he simply sat and waited for her to wake. And while he waited, he planned. Marcus Thorn would answer for what he'd done. And not just Thorn. Every noble who'd been operating these indenture contracts, every vampire who'd turned a blind eye, every member of the traditionalist faction who'd enabled this system to flourish. Alexander had been patient for 2 centuries, had played the diplomatic game, had tried to change hearts and minds, had believed that slow reform was better than violent revolution. But Sophia's broken body and terrified eyes had shown him the cost of his patience, the price that humans had paid while he'd played nice with monsters. No more. He'd been forged in revolution 300 years ago, had taken his throne by force from a tyrant who treated humans as cattle. Somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten that some things were worth fighting for. worth burning the world down to protect. Sophia stirred as dawn approached. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then sharpening with panic as she realized she was in an unfamiliar place. "Easy," Alexander said softly from his chair. "You're safe. You're in my private chambers. No one can reach you here." Sophia's head whipped toward his voice. She tried to sit up, winced at the pain, and Alexander was beside the bed in an instant, helping her into a more comfortable position. "Where?" Her voice was hoarse. "Where is he? Did he come for me? Your Majesty, please, you have to." "Marcus Thorne is nowhere near you," Alexander said firmly, "and he won't be. You're under my protection now, Sophia. No one is taking you anywhere." She stared at him, disbelief and desperate hope warring in her expression. "You know my name?" "I had my people research Marcus Thorne's operations. Your name was in his records." Alexander's jaw tightened, along with far too much other information that makes me want to burn his holdings to the ground. "You can't," Sophia's voice broke. "Your Majesty, I'm grateful, so grateful, but you don't understand. The contract I signed, it's magical, binding. If I'm away from him too long, it triggers punishment clauses. The pain will—" She was shaking now, tears streaming down her face. "I shouldn't have come here. I shouldn't have put this on you. I was just so scared and desperate, and I thought—" "You thought correctly." Alexander sat on the edge of the bed, his voice gentle despite the fury burning in his chest. "Sophia, look at me, please." She did, her good eye wide and terrified. "I am the king of this realm. I make the laws. I enforce the laws. And I am telling you that whatever contract you signed, whatever magical bindings Marcus Thorne placed on you, they are void, illegal, an affront to my sovereignty." His hand covered hers carefully, his cool skin against her fevered warmth. "He cannot take you back. I will not allow it, even if I have to declare war on the entire traditionalist faction to protect you." "Why?" The word came out as a whisper. "Why would you do that for me? I'm nobody, just a thing he bought, property that ran away."
"You're not property. You're a person who was brave enough to run, smart enough to find me, and strong enough to keep going even when everything told you to give up." Alexander's grip tightened slightly. "And you're under my protection now, which means you're one of the most important people in this kingdom, because I keep my promises, Sophia, and I promised you'd be safe." She burst into tears. Great, shaking sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her soul. Alexander carefully pulled her into his arms, letting her cry against his chest while he murmured reassurances and stroked her hair. "You're safe," he repeated over and over. "You're safe now. I've got you. He can't hurt you anymore." Eventually, the sobs subsided into hiccups, then into exhausted silence. Sophia pulled back slightly, wiping at her eyes. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. You're a king. I'm getting tears and probably snot all over your—" "I don't care about my clothes." Alexander's voice was warm. "And you have nothing to apologize for. You've been through hell. You're entitled to cry." Sophia laughed, a broken, bitter sound. "Hell, yes. That's a good word for it." She looked down at her hands, at the scars circling her wrists where manacles had bitten into flesh. 6 years. 6 years of being his thing, his toy. He'd use me for blood when he was hungry, for labor when he needed work done, for— She cut herself off, shuddering. Alexander felt his fangs extend involuntarily. He forced them to retract, forced his voice to stay calm. "You don't have to tell me everything right now. When you're ready, if you're ready, I'll listen. But Sophia, whatever he did to you, It's over now. You're not going back. The contract. I'll break it. He said it with absolute certainty. I have the best magical theorists in the kingdom on my staff. They'll find a way to dissolve the bindings, and if they can't break them legally, I'll break them by force. You'd really do that? I'd do far more than that.
Alexander met her eyes steadily. Marcus Thorne has been summoned to court tomorrow for a business audit. He doesn't know yet that you're here. When he arrives, I'm going to give him a choice. Dissolve all his contracts voluntarily and face trial for his crimes, or refuse and face something far worse. Sophia's eyes widened. He won't choose the first option. He's too proud, too sure that he's protected by the law and his noble connections. Then he'll face the consequences of that pride. Alexander's smile was cold. I've been too patient for too long, Sophia. Too worried about political balance and keeping the traditionalists happy. But seeing you collapse at my feet, seeing the evidence of what he's done to you, he shook his head. Some things are worth going to war over, and human dignity is one of them. You'll make enemies. I already have enemies. This will just clarify which ones have been hiding. He stood, moving to the window. Rest today. Eat. Let Soren check on your injuries. Tomorrow, if you're strong enough, I'd like you to be present when Marcus Thorne arrives. You don't have to speak if you don't want to, but I want him to see you, safe, protected, beyond his reach. I want him to understand that his power over you is finished. I don't know if I'm brave enough. You are. Alexander turned back to her. You've already proven it. You ran from someone you feared above all else. You kept running until you found safety. That takes more courage than most warriors I've known have ever demonstrated. Sophia looked at him for a long moment, something like wonder in her expression. They say you're a monster. The other servants, the free ones who came to Thorne's estate sometimes, they'd whisper about you, about how you're ancient and powerful and ruthless. I am all those things. But you're also kind, gentle. You caught me when I fell. You're calling me by my name instead of treating me like property. Her voice was soft. Why? Because 300 years ago, I was human. I had a family, a village, a life. Alexander's expression grew distant. And then vampires came and destroyed it all, killed my parents, my siblings, enslaved everyone who survived. I was turned against my will, forced to become the very thing I hated most. How did you become king? I killed the vampire who turned me. Then I killed the king who'd allowed the massacre. Then I killed every noble who stood in my way until I sat on the throne and could enforce my own rules. His voice was matter-of-fact. I swore that day that no human in my kingdom would ever be property again, that vampires and humans would coexist as equals or not at all. But they're not equals. Not really. We're weaker, vulnerable, easy to exploit. Which is exactly why the strong must protect the weak, why I must use my power to shield those who can't shield themselves. Alexander crossed back to the bed, his eyes intense. You asked why I'm doing this for you. That's why. Because I remember being powerless, and I refuse to let that powerlessness continue in my kingdom. Sophia reached out tentatively, her scarred hand touching his. Thank you for remembering, for caring, for being the kind of monster who protects instead of destroys. You're welcome. He squeezed her hand gently. Now rest. You're safe here, I promise. He left her to sleep, posting guards outside the door with explicit instructions that no one, absolutely no one, was to disturb her without his personal authorization. Then he descended to his war room and began preparing for battle.
Marcus Thorne arrived at the palace the next afternoon with all the arrogance of a minor noble who believed himself untouchable. He was tall and handsome in the way many vampires were, with platinum hair and ice-blue eyes. He bowed to Alexander with just enough deference to be technically respectful, while making his contempt for the proceeding clear. "Your Majesty."
I came as soon as I received your summons, though I confess I'm puzzled about this business audit. My operations are entirely legitimate and above board. Are they? Alexander sat on his throne, radiating cold power. The throne room was full. Head made sure every noble in the city was present for this. Tell me, Lord Thorne, how many humans are currently in your employment? 53, Your Majesty, all working under legitimate contracts. Contracts that bind them magically to your service, that prevent them from leaving, even if they wish to, that allow you to punish them for disobedience. Alexander's voice was deceptively mild. Contracts that look suspiciously like slavery with extra steps. Thorne's expression tightened. The contracts are legal, Your Majesty, reviewed and approved by Lord Severin's office. Yes, I'm aware. Alexander leaned forward slightly. Tell me about Asset 23, Sophia Reed. For just a moment, genuine shock flickered across Thorne's face. Then it was gone, replaced by careful neutrality. One of my servants. Why? She's here, in my palace, under my personal protection. Alexander watched Thorne go pale. She ran from you, Marcus, escaped your estate, and fled here, begging me not to let you take her back. Would you like to explain why one of your legitimate employees would be so terrified of returning to your service? She's confused, ungrateful. I gave her family money. You gave her family a fraction of what she's worth, and then trapped her in magical bondage for 6 years. Alexander rose from his throne. You used her as a blood source, as unpaid labor. You beat her when she displeased you, and when she ran, you would have killed her if she'd been caught. That's a lie. I treat my servants well. Bring her in, Alexander commanded. The side door opened. Sophia entered, supported by 2 of Alexander's personal guards. She'd been cleaned up, dressed in proper clothing, her injuries tended. But the damage was still visible. The fading bruises, the way she held her splinted wrist, the terror in her eyes as she saw Marcus Thorne. Thorne's face went from pale to furious. That property belongs to me. The contract is void. Alexander's voice cracked like thunder. I am king of this realm, Marcus Thorne, and I am telling you that your contracts are illegal slavery dressed up in legal language. They violate every law I've put in place regarding human dignity and autonomy. They are null and void as of this moment. You can't, the traditionalists will never allow. The traditionalists don't have a choice. Alexander descended from the dais, moving with supernatural speed until he stood directly before Thorne. You have 2 options, Lord Thorne. Option 1. You voluntarily dissolve all your contracts, free every human in your employment, compensate them for years of unpaid labor, and face trial for your crimes. If you're fortunate, you'll only be stripped of your titles and exiled. And option 2? Option 2, Alexander's smile was terrible. Option 2, you refuse. You claim your contracts are legal. You demand your property be returned. His hand shot out, gripping Thorne's throat. And I execute you right here, right now, for the crime of slavery. Then I seize all your assets, free every human myself, and hunt down every other noble operating similar schemes. And when the traditionalists object,
I'll happily remind them that my throne was built on revolution, and I'm perfectly willing to start another one." The throne room was silent. Every vampire present was holding their breath. Thorn struggled against Alexander's grip, his own power flaring. But he was centuries younger, weaker, and Alexander had spent 300 years getting stronger. The struggle was over before it began. "Choose," Alexander said softly, "but choose quickly, because my patience with slavers ended the moment Sophia collapsed at my feet." You're mad," Thorn gasped.
"The traditionalists will destroy you for this. Let them try." Alexander's grip tightened. "I've been waiting 200 years for them to give me an excuse to clean house. Thank you for providing it." "Wait!" Thorn's eyes were wide with genuine terror now. "Wait, please! I'll do it! I'll dissolve the contracts, free everyone! Just please!" Alexander held him for one more moment, making sure the message was clear. Then he released his grip, and Thorn fell to his knees, gasping. "You have 24 hours to free every human in your employ and provide proof that you've done so. You will compensate each of them with 10 years' wages at fair market rate. You will dissolve every magical binding. And then you will present yourself to my Minister of Justice to face trial." Alexander's voice was iron. "If you fail to do any of these things, if you try to run, if you harm even one person in retaliation, I will hunt you down myself. Am I clear?" "Yes," Thorn whispered. "Yes, Your Majesty, perfectly clear." "Good. Get out of my sight." Thorn fled. The moment he was gone, the throne room erupted into chaos. Nobles shouting, arguing, some praising Alexander's actions while others condemned them. Lord Severin was already gathering his faction, clearly preparing for some kind of coordinated response. Alexander let them argue. Instead, he crossed to where Sophia stood, still supported by the guards. She was shaking, but also smiling, a real, genuine smile that transformed her battered face. "You did it," she whispered. "You actually made him back down. I told you I would protect you." Alexander offered his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, Sophia took it. "And I always keep my promises." He led her from the throne room, leaving his court to their chaos and arguments. Let them plot, let them scheme. He'll deal with whatever came next. For now, he had a survivor to care for and a kingdom to reform. And anyone who stood in his way was welcome to test whether he was bluffing about starting another revolution. Spoiler, he wasn't. The next weeks were a whirlwind of political upheaval. True to his word, Marcus Thorn freed every human in his employment, dissolved their contracts, and paid compensation. His trial was swift and public. Witnesses came forward in droves once they realized the king was serious about enforcing anti-slavery laws. Thorn was found guilty on 17 counts of illegal bondage, abuse, and exploitation. His sentence, complete loss of noble status, seizure of all assets, and permanent exile from the kingdom. It sent a message, a loud one. Within a month, 3 other nobles voluntarily came forward to dissolve their own employment contracts. Within 2 months, Lord Severin's traditionalist faction had splintered, half breaking away to form a moderate conservative group that supported Alexander's reforms, half doubling down on their opposition. And through it all, Sophia recovered. She stayed in Alexander's private chambers at first, too afraid to venture far. But gradually, as days turned into weeks with no sign of Thorn or his allies, she began to relax, began to explore the palace, began to smile more easily. Alexander found himself spending more time with her than strictly necessary. He'd check on her recovery and somehow end up staying for hours, talking about everything and nothing. She was intelligent,
curious, funny when she forgot to be afraid. She asked him questions about his past, about his rule, about what he'd seen in 3 centuries of life. And he found himself answering honestly instead of deflecting like he usually did. "Why me?" Sophia asked one evening as they sat in his mother's old garden, the one place in the palace where he felt most human. "I mean, I understand why you helped me, but why do you keep spending time with me? Surely a king has better things to do than talk to a former slave."
"You're not a former slave," Alexander corrected gently. "You're a survivor. There's a difference. And I spend time with you because I enjoy your company. Is that so hard to believe?" "Yes," Sophia laughed. "You're an ancient vampire king who could have anyone in the world. Why waste time on me?" "Because everyone else wants something from me. Power, favor, advantage." He turned to look at her, the moonlight catching in her dark hair. "You just want to talk, to understand, to be treated like a person. That's refreshing." "I want other things too," Sophia admitted softly. "I want to thank you properly for saving my life. I want to figure out who I am without him controlling every aspect of my existence. I want—" She cut herself off, blushing. "You want what?" "To understand why my heart races every time you look at me, why I feel safe with you even though you're the most dangerous person in the kingdom, why I think about you constantly, and why the thought of leaving this palace, of not seeing you every day, feels like losing something precious." Alexander's breath caught. "Sophia, I know it's foolish. I know you probably see me as charity work, a cause to champion, but I can't help it. You saved me. You protected me. You made me feel like I mattered. How am I supposed to not fall for that?" "You're not foolish." Alexander moved closer, his hand reaching out to cup her face. "And I don't see you as charity work. I see you as someone extraordinary, someone brave and strong, who's been through hell and came out still able to laugh, still able to trust, still able to see good in monsters. You're not a monster. I am. But when you look at me, I feel human again." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "And yes, my heart races too, or would if it still beat properly. And yes, I think about you constantly. And yes, the thought of you leaving feels unbearable. Then why do we keep dancing around it?" Sophia's voice was barely audible. "Why not just—" He kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative, giving her every chance to pull away. But Sophia didn't pull away. She pressed closer, her hands fisting in his shirt, kissing him back with all the desperate longing of someone who'd been denied gentleness for far too long. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. "I'm 300 years old, Sophia. I've seen empires rise and fall. I've loved and lost more times than I can count." His voice was rough. "But I've never felt like this, like someone reached into my chest and rekindled something I thought had died centuries ago."
Is that a good thing?
"It's terrifying, and wonderful, and completely unexpected." He pulled back to look at her properly. "But Sophia, you need to be sure. I'm not human. I'm not safe. My world is full of danger and political intrigue, and people who would hurt you just to get to me. If we do this, if we're together, you'll have a target on your back for the rest of your life." "I already have a target on my back," Sophia pointed out. "At least with you, I know you'll actually defend me instead of just using me as bait." She smiled. "Besides, I didn't survive 6 years with Marcus Thorne just to let fear rule the rest of my life. If I want to be with you, and I do, then I'll deal with whatever consequences come. You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." She kissed him again, fierce and claiming. "You're mine, King Alexander, whether you like it or not." He laughed, a sound of pure joy that echoed through the garden. "I like it very much, actually." They stayed in the garden until dawn threatened, talking and kissing and planning for a future that suddenly seemed bright with possibility. Lord Severin made his move 3 months later. He'd been gathering support among the most conservative nobles, building a coalition to challenge Alexander's overreach in the Marcus Thorne case. The plan was to present a formal petition to limit the king's power to interfere in private business matters, essentially trying to codify the right of nobles to operate their quasi-slavery operations without royal interference. It was a bold move, and a stupid one. Severin called for a full council meeting to present his petition. He'd carefully counted votes, made sure he had enough support to force the issue. What he hadn't counted on was Alexander's response. The king arrived at the council meeting with Sophia at his side. She wore formal court dress now, deep green silk that complemented her coloring, with her hair styled elegantly and the last of her injuries fully healed. She looked every inch a lady of the court, confident and poised. The traditionalists' eyes widened. Some of them began whispering furiously among themselves. "Lord Severin," Alexander said pleasantly as he took his seat at the head of the table, "I understand you have a petition to present. Please proceed." Severin stood, clearly thrown off balance by Sophia's presence, but determined to push forward. He read the petition, a carefully worded document that argued for noble autonomy in household management and limits on royal interference in private contracts. When he finished, Alexander smiled. "Thank you for that fascinating exercise in creative euphemism. Now, allow me to present my counter-petition." He stood, and the temperature in the room dropped. "I propose the Human Rights and Protection Act. This act will establish the following. 1. All magical contracts involving human labor must be reviewed and approved by the Crown to ensure they meet minimum standards for compensation, working conditions, and voluntary participation. 2. Any human may petition the Crown directly for contract dissolution if they believe they've been coerced or abused. 3. Any noble found operating slavery under the guise of employment contracts will face immediate execution and seizure of all assets." The room erupted into chaos. "You can't," Severin sputtered. "That's tyranny. You're talking about executing nobles without trial." "There would be a trial," Alexander said calmly. "A swift one, with me as judge. But yes, the penalty for slavery is death. I thought I'd made that clear when I almost executed Marcus Thorne in my throne room." "This is outrageous. The nobility will never accept." "The nobility doesn't have to accept it." Alexander's voice cut through the protests like a blade. "I am king by right of conquest. I took this throne from a tyrant who treated humans as cattle, and I've spent 200 years trying to build something better. But clearly, gentle reform isn't working, so now we do it my way." He gestured to Sophia. "Lady Sophia Reed, yes, I've granted her a title, will be heading the new Office of Human Welfare. Any human in the kingdom who believes they're being mistreated can appeal directly to her office. She'll investigate, and if she finds evidence of abuse or illegal contracts, she'll bring those cases directly to me." Sophia stood, her voice clear and strong. "I know what it's like to be property, to be helpless, to believe no one will save you because you're just a human, and humans don't matter." Her eyes swept the room, settling on each traditionalist in turn. "His Majesty showed me that humans do matter, that we're worth protecting, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure every human in this kingdom knows they have someone who will fight for them." "This is madness," Severin said, but his voice had lost its conviction. "You're giving power to a former slave, someone with no noble blood, no training, no bias toward protecting the nobility at the expense of the vulnerable."
Alexander finished. Exactly. That's the point, Severin. You and your faction have proven that you can't be trusted to regulate yourselves, so I'm putting someone in charge who actually understands what's at stake. Lord Aldrich, head of the progressive faction, stood. I support this act, fully. It's past time we stopped pretending that these employment contracts are anything other than slavery. One by one, other nobles stood in support. Not all of them. About a third of the council remained seated, including Severin and his die-hard traditionalists. But it was enough. More than enough. The motion passes, Alexander declared. The Human Rights and Protection Act is now law. Lord Severin, if you or any member of your faction have objections, you're welcome to present them formally. But I warn you, I will investigate every noble house that votes against this act. Thoroughly. And if I find evidence of illegal contracts, I will prosecute without mercy. It was a threat and a promise. The message was clear. Support human rights or prepare to be examined very closely. Severin knew when he was beaten. He nodded stiffly and sat down, his expression murderous. The meeting adjourned shortly after. As nobles filed out, many of the progressives stopped to congratulate Sophia, welcoming her to their ranks. A few even apologized for not acting sooner. When they were finally alone, Alexander pulled Sophia into his arms. "You were magnificent," he murmured against her hair. "I was terrified," she admitted. "But I kept thinking, if I don't do this, if I don't stand up, then what was the point of surviving? What was the point of you saving me if I don't use that second chance to help others?" "You're going to change this kingdom," Alexander said with certainty. "You're going to make it better than I ever could alone." "We're going to make it better," Sophia corrected. "Together." "Together," he agreed. The Office of Human Welfare opened its doors 1 month later. Within the first week, Sophia had received 300 petitions from humans across the kingdom reporting abuse, unfair contracts, and suspected slavery operations. She worked tirelessly, investigating each case with a team of lawyers and magical experts that Alexander had assembled. By the end of the first month, 5 noble houses had been charged with illegal contract practices. 3 chose to settle, freeing their human workers, paying compensation, and accepting oversight. 2 refused and faced trial. Both were found guilty. Both lost everything. The message spread rapidly through the kingdom. Humans were no longer unprotected. They had an advocate. They had the king's ear. And anyone who hurt them would face consequences. Sophia became something of a legend among the human population. They called her the King's Justice, the one who'd climbed from slavery to power and used that power to help others. Songs were written about her, stories told of her courage. And through it all, Alexander watched with fierce pride as the woman he loved transformed his kingdom into something closer to his original vision. But success bred enemies. 6 months after the office opened, Sophia was returning from an inspection of a textile mill when her carriage was attacked. Masked vampires came out of nowhere, moving with coordinated precision. They killed her guards, disabled her driver, and had hands on Sophia before she could scream for help. She fought anyway. Alexander had insisted on training her in self-defense after they'd become a couple, and while she couldn't match vampire strength, she could make herself difficult prey. Her struggle bought just enough time. Alexander appeared like an avenging angel, moving so fast he was almost a blur. The attackers didn't stand a chance. Within seconds, 3 were dead and 2 were fleeing. He let them run. He'd hunt them later. Right now, Sophia was his priority. "Are you hurt?" His hands ran over her frantically, checking for injuries. "I'm fine. Scared, but fine." She clung to him, shaking. "They said They said Severin sent them, that I was a cancer that needed to be cut out before I destroyed the old ways. Alexander's eyes blazed red. Where's Severin now? Alexander, what are you going to do? What I should have done months ago. He picked her up, carrying her with supernatural speed back to the palace. He deposited her in his chambers with strict instructions not to leave, posted his most trusted guards at the door, and then went hunting. He found Severin in his estate on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by his faction, clearly preparing to flee. They'd known the assassination attempt would fail, had known Alexander would come for them. Lord Severin, Alexander said as he walked through the front door, which had torn off its hinges. You tried to kill someone under my protection, someone I love. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences? We were defending the old ways, Severin said, trying for defiance. The natural order. Vampires above humans, as it's always been. The natural order? Alexander's voice was ice. You mean the order where the strong prey on the weak, where power gives you the right to abuse anyone weaker than you. Yes, that's what we are, predators. You've forgotten that in your quest to be loved by your human pets. Alexander moved. One moment he was across the room. The next, his hand was wrapped around Severin's throat. I haven't forgotten what I am, he said softly. I'm a predator who's chosen to protect the weak instead of devouring them. I'm a monster who's decided that strength means responsibility, not license. And I'm a king who's done being patient with vampires who think cruelty is a virtue. He looked around at the gathered nobles, Severin's supporters, the last die-hard traditionalists. You have a choice.
Swear loyalty to me, to my laws, to the kingdom I'm building, or die here, tonight, with your leader. Some of them swore immediately, falling to their knees. Others hesitated, but ultimately yielded when they saw the absolute certainty in Alexander's eyes. 3 refused. They died quickly. Alexander wasn't cruel. He simply removed threats to his kingdom with efficient brutality. Severin died last. He was still trying to speak, to argue, to justify himself, when Alexander ended his existence with a single twist. The would-be revolution was over before it really began. Alexander returned to the palace covered in blood, none of it his own, to find Sophia pacing in his chambers despite his instructions to rest. She took one look at him and knew. Severin, dead, along with anyone who wouldn't swear loyalty to the new order. He moved to wash his hands, trying to scrub away the evidence of violence. I'm sorry you had to see me like this. I'm sorry your life is filled with danger because of me. Don't. Sophia crossed to him, taking his blood-stained hands in hers. Don't apologize for protecting me. Don't apologize for being what you need to be. I knew what I was choosing when I chose you. I killed them, executed them without formal trial. I'm a tyrant, Sophia, the very thing I claim to oppose. You're a king who protects his people, who removes threats, who draws lines in the sand and enforces them. She pulled him close, not caring about the blood. Yes, you're dangerous. Yes, you're ruthless. But you're also the only reason I'm alive. The only reason hundreds of humans can live without fear of being enslaved. The only reason this kingdom is becoming something better. At what cost? His voice was raw. How many more will I have to kill? How much blood will I spill in the name of progress? As much as necessary. Sophia's voice was firm. I've seen the alternative, Alexander. I've lived it. 6 years of hell because no one was willing to draw those lines, to enforce those laws, to say enough. So yes, kill the ones who won't change. Destroy the ones who insist on treating humans as property. I'll help you do it." He pulled back to look at her, searching her face. "You mean that?" "I mean it," she smiled, fierce and determined. "You asked me once why I'm not afraid of you. This is why. Because your violence has purpose. Because your ruthlessness is in service of something good. Because I know that you'll only hurt those who deserve it." "You've changed," Alexander said softly. "The woman who collapsed at my feet 6 months ago would never have said that." "The woman who collapsed at your feet 6 months ago was broken, terrified, helpless." Sophia's eyes blazed. "You helped me put myself back together, gave me power and purpose, taught me that I could be strong. This is who I am now, someone who'll fight beside you instead of hiding behind you." Alexander kissed her then, deep and claiming and full of desperate love. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway." She pulled him toward the bathing chamber. "Come on, let's get you cleaned up. And then you're going to hold me while I try not to think about how close I came to losing you today." "You'll never lose me," Alexander promised. "I'm 300 years old, and I've survived wars, revolutions, and countless assassination attempts. A few disgruntled nobles aren't going to take me down." "Good, because I have plans for the next 50 years, and they all involve you." He smiled, genuine and warm and utterly content. "Tell me about these plans." So she did. They talked while he washed away the blood, while they changed into comfortable clothes, while they curled up together in his enormous bed. Sophia talked about expanding the Office of Human Welfare, about establishing schools for human children, about creating a formal system where humans could report abuse without fear of retaliation. Alexander listened and added his own ideas. They planned and dreamed and built a future together with words and hope and absolute certainty that they could make it happen. Eventually, Sophia fell asleep in his arms, exhausted from the day's terror. Alexander held her and watched her sleep and thought about how one broken woman's courage had changed everything. She'd fallen at his feet, crying for protection, and he'd given it to her. In doing so, he'd found something he'd lost forever: purpose, passion, hope. She'd saved him just as much as he'd saved her. And together, they were going to transform this kingdom into something worthy of her faith. "Happy anniversary," Alexander murmured as they opened the ball with a waltz. "Happy revolution," Sophia corrected with a smile. "That's really what we're celebrating, isn't it? The day everything changed." "The day you changed everything," he agreed. "By being brave enough to run, to hope, to believe that I might actually help you. Best decision I ever made." She leaned into him as they turned through the familiar pattern, even if it did almost get me killed several times. "About that," Alexander's voice turned serious. "I've been thinking about your safety, about our future, about the fact that you're human and I'm not, and eventually, I'll get old and die while you stay young forever." "I know." Sophia had thought about this too. "What are you proposing?" "I'm proposing that you consider turning, becoming vampire, joining me in immortality." He rushed on before she could respond. "Not now, not until you're ready. But Sophia, I can't imagine eternity without you. And I know I'm being selfish, but yes." Alexander stumbled in the dance, something that never happened. "Yes, I'll turn. Eventually." Sophia smiled up at him. "Not yet. I want a few more years as human first. Want to see what we can accomplish before I make that choice. But yes, Alexander, when I'm ready, when the time is right, I want forever with you." He pulled her close right there in the middle of the dance floor,
kissing her with all the desperate relief of someone who'd been terrified of losing the one thing he couldn't bear to lose. The court applauded, some genuinely happy for their king, others simply knowing better than to disapprove. When they finally broke apart, Sophia laughed. That wasn't very dignified for a king. I don't care about dignity. I care about you. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. You've made me feel human again, Sophia, given me hope for the future. I can't imagine ruling without you beside me. You won't have to. She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. We're partners in everything, for however long I'm human, and then for forever after that. Forever sounds perfect.
They danced until dawn, surrounded by a court that had learned to respect human dignity, until only the two of them remained in the ballroom with their reflections stretching into infinity. A king and his consort. A monster and the woman who taught him to be human. A future bright with possibility. Ready to face another year of reform and revolution? Alexander asked as they finally headed toward their shared chambers. Ready to face another century of it, Sophia corrected. Someone has to keep you honest and make sure you don't forget why we're doing this. I could never forget, not with you reminding me every day. He kissed her temple. Thank you, Sophia, for running to me instead of away from me, for trusting me when you had no reason to trust anyone, for being brave enough to change my world. Thank you for catching me when I fell, she replied softly, and for never letting me fall again. They entered their chambers hand in hand, closing the door on a kingdom that was slowly becoming everything they dreamed it could be. Outside, the sun rose over a land where humans and vampires coexisted with mutual respect, where the strong protected the weak, where a former slave had become a lady and was well on her way to becoming a queen. All because one woman had been brave enough to cry for help, and one king had been good enough to answer. Epilogue, 5 years later. Sophia stood in the throne room, facing the full assembly of nobility. She was 30 now, with the confidence of someone who'd spent 5 years reshaping a kingdom. Beside her stood Alexander, her king, her love, her partner in everything. Today was the day. "My lords and ladies," Alexander announced, his voice carrying supernatural authority. 5 years ago, a woman fell at my feet begging for protection. Today, that woman stands beside me as my equal, my consort, and the architect of more reform in this kingdom than any ruler in history. She has proven her worth 1,000 times over. And now, I ask you formally, will you accept Sophia Reed as your queen? The progressive faction rose immediately, declaring their support. Even some of the former traditionalists, those who'd survived the purge and learned to adapt, stood and offered their approval. The vote was unanimous. Then, by the power vested in me as king of this realm, I declare Sophia Reed to be queen consort with all rights and privileges thereof. Alexander turned to her, producing a crown of silver and sapphires, his mother's crown, saved for this moment. Sophia, will you rule beside me? Will you be my queen, my partner, my equal in all things? I will, she said clearly, for as long as I'm human, and then forever after. He placed the crown on her head. The court erupted in applause. And that night, in the privacy of their chambers, Sophia Reed, former slave, survivor, revolutionary, and now queen, made her final choice. "Turn me," she told Alexander. "I'm ready. I've lived fully as human. I've done everything I wanted to do. Now I want forever with you. I want to spend centuries continuing this work, building this kingdom, protecting the people we've sworn to serve. Are you certain? I've never been more certain of anything." She tilted her head, exposing her throat. "Make me yours, completely.
Let me be strong enough to stand beside you for eternity." Alexander bit down, and Sophia felt her human life drain away, felt vampire blood replace it, rewriting her at a fundamental level. The transformation was agony, 3 days of burning and changing and dying and being reborn. But when she woke, it was to supernatural strength, enhanced senses, and Alexander's face the first thing she saw. "Welcome back, my queen," he whispered. "My love, my eternal partner." Sophia smiled, feeling her new fangs sharp against her lip. "How do I look?" "Magnificent, terrifying, perfect." He pulled her into his arms.
Ready to spend the next 1,000 years changing the world? Ready to spend forever doing it. She kissed him, fierce and claiming. Together, always together. Outside, the sun set over a kingdom transformed, where humans lived as equals, where vampires had learned that strength meant protection instead of predation, where a former slave had become a queen and would rule for centuries to come. All because one woman had been brave enough to fall at a king's feet crying for help, and one king had been noble enough to catch her. Forever.